Havoc had secured. Seated in a chair with a hand weapon leveled at Havoc, Cole heard the holocam click on and saw Havoc glance at him. Am I correct in assuming that you intend to kill me? Havoc asked. Killing is what you are good at, after all. You're doing pretty good for a beginner, Havoc. Havoc snorted in disdain. I'm prepared to die for the cause, Captain. Maybe you are, Cole said, but I'm not going to give you that privilege. You're going to die for killing Rella. Besides, your cause is lost. Havoc glanced at the holocam again. You think so? Cole gestured toward the transparent steel window. You hear those blaster bolts? The Jedi found your shooter, the one controlling the droid. Valorum is out of danger. I never thought much of the plan anyway, seeing how Valorum is trying to dismantle the Federation the same as you are. Havoc laughed shortly. You failed to see the truth, Cole. You really are too old for the game. What makes you think that we were ever after Valorum? Cole's grin straightened. Grimacing in pain, he pushed himself out of the chair and limped to the window. The blaster fight had thrown the hall into utter chaos. The members of the Trade Federation Directorate were standing behind their curved table, surrounded by their security droids, everyone safe inside a shimmering force field. Off to one side, a group of Jedi and Judicials were closing on the Federation's rostrum. Cole swung to Havoc, his eyes blazing. You're after the Trade Federation! Havoc couldn't restrain a triumphant smile. It was just a matter of getting them to activate the force field. He indicated the devices that were aimed down at the hall. The scanner detected the activation. The holocam is going to do the rest. The remote, Cole said, as if in a daze. He lunged for the cam, meeting Havoc halfway. They slammed into each other and fell grappling to the floor of the booth. They rolled toward the door, each man fighting for superiority, the blaster between them in the clutch of 4 hands. Cole swung his elbow into Havoc's face, knocking him sideways, then used Havoc's momentum to pitch himself on top of Havoc, pinning him to the floor with his knees. Havoc squirmed, but held tightly to the blaster, triggering a bolt into Cole's abdomen. Cole fell partially back, then slumped forward, bringing all his weight to bear on the weapon and forcing it down into Havoc's chest. With what little of his strength remained, Cole squeezed out the final bolt. Dangling by one hand from the swaying walkway, Qui-Gon looked down at the floor of the hall. The trumpeters had stopped mid-fanfare and were scattering for cover, abandoning their horns as they ran. Everywhere else, delegates were fleeing their seats, literally climbing over one another in a desperate attempt to escape. Valorum was on his feet, but completely encircled by Senate guards. Stacy Teal, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Obi-Wan had taken up positions in front of the Trade Federation rostrum, their lightsabers lifted to deflect fire from the droids. But the Directorate members had raised their force field, which meant that no bolts could enter or leave the translucent shield. The 13 droids reached over their right shoulders for the blaster rifles secured to their backpacks. Then, all at once, the droids pivoted through an about-face. The members of the Directorate mouthed commands and curses and began to back away from the curved table. The droids fired. As the Jedi and Judicials watched helplessly, bolts tore into the table and chairs and into the flesh of the members, shaking them about and hurling them to all sides of the rostrum. The firing ceased as abruptly as it had started. For a moment, the droids stood with their cooling blasters, then they put them back over their shoulders and turned to face the hall. Stunned by what he had witnessed, Qui-Gon clambered onto the shaky walkway, dropped cross-legged to the slanted floor, staring off into space. The Nebula Front has largely disbanded, the judicial officer explained to Qui-Gon. The few we've been able to track down contend that they knew nothing about Havoc's plans for Ariadu. The informant was one of the moderates, Qui-Gon amended. It was through him that I learned about Cole's designs to raid the Trade Federation freighter at Dorvala, and on Asbaru about a clandestine operation Cole was executing for Havoc. The judicial, a thin, brown-haired woman with a personable manner, made note of Qui-Gon's remarks on a desktop datapad. It was just the two of them in a small cubicle in the Justice Department's cavernous headquarters on Coruscant. Almost a standard month had gone by since the assassinations. Deactivating the shield the members of the Trade Federation Directorate had thrown about themselves, unknowingly ushering in their own demise, had required a team of technicians using a pair of field disruptors. The two Neimoidians who had survived the massacre, Viceroy Newt Gunray and Senator Lott Dodd, had not protested when the same disruptors had been employed to dazzle the 13 droids into states of guaranteed submission. Diplomatic privilege had permitted the Neimoidians to depart Eriadu without answering any questions. Supreme Chancellor Valorum had ordered the Justice Department to commence an immediate investigation, but the chief investigators had soon found themselves thwarted by Lieutenant Governor Tarkin. Tarkin insisted that since Eriadu had failed to provide adequate security, the case should be handled by Eriaduan investigators. There was some concern that Tarkin, fearing retaliation by the Trade Federation, would seek to shift the blame to other parties, but instead he had simply impeded. Panaka may have been recently appointed, but he was not new to the court, since Panaka had served for a time under his predecessor, Captain Magneta.
Because King Varuna died under suspicious circumstances,
Amidala said,
Captain Panaka feels that additional security is required for all of us, including you, Senator.
Palpatine looked surprised, even entertained by the notion. I hardly think that's necessary on Coruscant, Your Majesty. The only danger here comes from having to fraternize with other senators, and somehow remain immune to the greed that plagues the Galactic Senate.
What about the recent troubles between the Trade Federation and the Nebula Front terrorists, Senator?
The Queen asked. Palpatine shook his head in disapproval. That sorry incident only pointed out how ineffectual the Republic has become at mediating such conflicts. Too many in the Senate place their own needs above the needs of the Republic.
What will become of Chancellor Valorum's proposal to tax the free trade zones?
I feel certain that the Supreme Chancellor will pursue the matter.
How will you vote, Senator, should the matter reach a vote?
How would you have me vote, Your Majesty? Amidala thought before replying.
My responsibility is to the people of Naboo. I would very much like to establish good relations with Chancellor Valorum, but Naboo can scarcely afford to become embroiled in a dispute that pits the Republic against the Trade Federation. I will abide by your decision on the matter, Senator.
Palpatine inclined his head. Then I will weigh the matter carefully, and vote according to what is ultimately best for Naboo and the Republic. Valorum stood at the tall windows, gazing out on the cityscape. The last time we met here, it was to discuss the Trade Federation's request for protection from terrorists, he said. And in the months since, the situation has only intensified. When I reflect on the sequence of events that have brought us to this dark place, I find myself at a loss. If someone had tried to tell me months ago that we were headed here, I wouldn't have heeded the warning, because I wouldn't have considered it possible. Senator Palpatine said nothing. He waited for Valorum to turn from the view. Out of respect for what occurred at the summit, I have deferred in bringing the motion for taxation before the Senate. But I am under pressure to resolve the matter once and for all, from those who support it, as well as those who oppose it. Valorum pivoted to face Palpatine. You, perhaps more than anyone, know the climate of the Senate. Did the assassinations create sympathy for the Trade Federation? To the point where we won't be able to gather sufficient support for taxation? On the contrary, Palpatine said, what happened on Eriadu only reinforced everyone's fears that we are entering violent times, that the conflict between the Trade Federation and the